In terms of mainstream Hollywood movies based on true events, it's always fascinating to see what the filmmakers decide to retain and what they exaggerate for dramatic purposes. In the case of James Mangold's critically and commercially acclaimed Oscar-nominated racing film Ford vs. Ferrari, also known internationally as Le Mans '66, most of the macro events depicted in the film remain true in spirit, although quite a few subtle liberties were taken to streamline the narrative and make the story as focused as possible. Other minor real-life instances that took place have been slightly altered and appropriated to include the key characters in the film, giving the overall experience a harmless and nearly unrecognizable balance of fact and fiction that actually makes the inherent drama of the movie more riveting and the sympathy for the characters far more profound. So unless you're an ardent gearhead, easily offended racing historian, or someone involved in the true events themselves, most of the imperceptible details changed for the film are done for the benefit of the audience's entertainment. Whether it's the Ford Motor Company attempting to purchase Ferrari and the crass corporate interference that ensued, the complex relationship between Carroll Shelby and Ken Miles, the veracity of the 24 hours of the Le Mans race in 1966, or the tragic fate of Miles himself, there's a lot to sift through regarding what occurred in reality versus what was manufactured for the film. Care to hear more? Good. Rev up your goddamn engines and take your marks. It's about time to pop the hood and find out what the fuck really happened to Ford vs. Ferrari. The film opens with a flashback to the 24 Hours of Le Mans race in 1959, in which American race car driver Carroll Shelby, played by Matt Damon, is seen winning the competition for the Aston Martin racing team along with two other American drivers. All of this is 100% true so far. But then, in the film, Shelby makes a pit stop that is suddenly lit on fire for a brief moment before the flames are extinguished by his crew, and he continues the race. This did not happen to Shelby in real life, but it did happen to his partner Roy Salvadori the same year during the Goodwood Circuit race in Chester, England. The Salvadori incident almost certainly inspired the shot of Shelby being lit ablaze, although the consequences of the fire were far less dramatic in the film than what happened to Salvadori in real life. In the film, Shelby is told by doctors after winning the Le Mans '59 that he has a heart condition that requires him to retire from racing. Later, Shelby briefly mentions taking pills for his condition, but the film somewhat glosses over the fact that Shelby already knew about his failing heart and kept his medical problems hidden from his race team. Shelby even won the 24 Hours of Le Mans in 1959, after keeping nitroglycerin pills under his tongue while he drove the entire race. We're guessing that this was left out to retain Shelby being caught on fire in the film. Otherwise, those nitroglycerin pills surely would have exploded in the blaze. After the race in 1959, the film leaps ahead to 1963, when the Ford Motor Company voices its desire to purchase the nearly bankrupt Ferrari sports car line for their own domestic gains and to compete in international racing. Ford's vice president, Lee Iacocca, played by John Barenthal, proposes to Henry Ford II, played by Tracy Letts, and who was really referred to as the Deuce, to buy the car company as a way of also assuming complete control of the Scuderia Ferrari racing team. While all of this is true and retained in the film, the lengthy negotiation process between Ford and Ferrari was omitted, likely for the sake of time. In reality, Ford initially offered to buy Ferrari for $10 million in 1963, which owner Enzo Ferrari initially agreed to. However, due to a clause in the contract that gave Ford full control over Ferrari's racing budget, Enzo felt so uncomfortable with giving up his power that he nixed the deal on the spot, saying his integrity as constructor would be greatly compromised. In the film, Enzo, played by Remo Girone, declines the deal with petty, insolent words for the Deuce, calling him fat and that his company makes ugly little cars, in ugly little factories. In reality, Enzo was much less disparaging of the Deuce in public following the dashed acquisition deal. In the film, Ferrari turns down Ford's offer, but uses it to leverage more money from the Italian car company Fiat. This did not happen in 1963 as shown in the movie. In fact, Fiat did not invest a stake in Ferrari until 1969, and did not become a majority owner of the company until 1988, well after Enzo's death. The next big event in the film takes place at Willow Springs Raceway, California in 1963, where the irascible British race driver, mechanic, and car designer Ken Miles, played by Christian Bale, is introduced. First of all, the race at Willow Springs never really took place. Secondly, the scenes at Willow Springs were filmed at the test track known as the Honda Proving Center of California. Thirdly, Miles is shown lashing out at racing officials after being disqualified due to the trunk of his car failing to close. While this did not occur at Willow Springs in 1963, something similar happened to Miles during a Palm Springs race in 1955. Miles built his own sports car dubbed the Flying Shingle, which was so fast that he was able to defeat Hollywood icon James Dean in a race. However, due to the car having wide fenders, Miles was disqualified and Dean was named the victor. This tidbit was not included in the movie. In the film, Miles becomes so upset about the disqualification at Willow Springs that he immediately hurls a wrench at Carroll Shelby and cracks his windshield when they first meet, a plot point that comes full circle at the end when Carroll affectionately gives the wrench to Ken's son Peter, played by Noah Jupe. By all accounts, Ken never threw a wrench at Carroll, nor did the two ever come to physical blows as shown. The scene was likely made up to establish Ken's hot temper, which is played up a bit in the film, and to portray the profound bond the two men would forge over time. That being said, Ken's son Peter and his wife Molly, played by Katrina Balfe, are based on and named after Miles's real family members. One slight difference between the film and reality is that in the film, Miles is introduced as already racing for Shelby. In reality, Miles was all but forced to join the team when his auto garage in Los Angeles was shuttered by the IRS, necessitating his need to succeed for his wife and child, or else face dire financial straits. In the film, once Shelby and Miles join forces on behalf of Ford, they begin working on a high-performance race car to rival Scuderia Ferrari's fastest vehicles. To do so, the two men design and test the Ford GT40 Mk1, a prototype that Miles tests at the Los Angeles International Airport. In reality, Ken's first test on the GT40 Mk1 took place in 1964 at Riverside International Raceway. In the film, Miles breaks the news to his wife Molly, who becomes upset over the work he's doing with Shelby, therefore increasing the domestic drama and raising the personal stakes for Miles. In reality, Miles's family already knew of his participation with Ford, Shelby, and the GT40 Mk1, with his son Peter present to witness the first trial run at Riverside. During the testing montage sequence, most of the events seen on screen really happened, including Ken's initial rejection of the first GT40 prototype as bloody awful. The ingenious countermeasures Miles and Shelby are seen testing, such as ripping out the heavy computerized data processor, called a dynamometer, that was placed in the passenger seat in favor of much lower-tech aerodynamic paper strip tests to get the car to reach top speeds, are fairly accurate representations of what occurred in reality. While the film doesn't specify the large investment Ford made, it is rumored that the company spent upward of $500 million developing the GT40. According to Popular Mechanics, by the time the car was ready for the Le Mans 1966, it was equipped with a whopping 427 cubic inch V8 engine. However, while Ford made its first foray into the 24 Hours of Le Mans in 1964 to disastrous results, this was entirely left out of the movie and the timeline of events skips 1 year ahead to 1965, which the movie makes appear to be Ford's entry into the famous French endurance race. While Miles and Shelby are given almost sole credit for the creation of the GT40 Mk1 in such a rapid time frame, the film glosses over the real-life contributions made by the Glass House, a think tank of Ford bureaucrats, as well as countless designers, engineers, contractors, and other key employees behind the scenes, who spent countless hours toiling on the prototypes. In order to keep the narrative focused and the dynamic of Miles and Shelby in opposition to the Ford executives, these contributions were primarily attributed to them in the film, rather than their innumerable colleagues. The film shows Ford's senior executive vice president, Leo Bebe, played by Josh Lucas, voicing his displeasure with Ken Miles as the potential driver, opting to replace him with American racer Bob Bondurant. Miles is seen dejectedly listening to the race on the radio from his auto shop, which, despite conjuring heartfelt sympathy for Miles, was completely fabricated for the film. In reality, Miles did race during the 1965 24 Hours of Le Mans, doing so for Chevy. In reality, all 6 GT40s that partook in Le Mans 1965 broke down before finishing the race. Miles, whose gearbox failed during the race, eventually lost to Ferrari, prompting the Deuce to truly demand vast improvements via the GT40 Mk2 prototype. Upon hearing the Deuce's commands, Shelby states that he isn't even sure that the paint on the car can last 24 hours, much less the engine and brakes. The infamous quip was genuinely uttered in reality, although Bebe is the one who said it, not Shelby. Here, the film emphasizes the conflict between Shelby and the corporate decision-by-committee business model at Ford, which Shelby blames as the reason for the GTO's initial failures at Le Mans. This really occurred as well, although Shelby's predecessor, John Wyer, is the one who let such concerns be known at first. After convincing the Deuce that a more streamlined approach is necessary to compete with Ferrari, Shelby is given free rein to hire who he wants to design and drive the GT40 at Le Mans 1966. One of the first things Shelby does in the film after getting the go-ahead is to lock Bebe in his office in order to convince the Deuce to allow Miles to drive the GT40 at Le Mans, which did not happen in reality. The scene was fabricated in order to sow further division between Shelby and the corporate interjections that hindered the entire process of Ford's rise to racing prominence. To wit, the scene in the film shows Shelby giving the Deuce a heart-racing test drive in the GT40, which is so exhilarating that it makes the man weep tears of frightful joy. First of all, it was Ken Miles who really gave the Deuce the test ride, and by all accounts, the Deuce did not shed a tear. Moreover, in the film, Shelby wagers his company, Shelby American, in the bet with the Deuce, stipulating that if Miles wins the 24 Hours of Daytona race in 1966, he will be able to race at Le Mans 66 as well. This did not happen in real life, and was likely manufactured to raise the dramatic stakes of Ken's Daytona result. Speaking of Daytona, the scenes that take place at the iconic Florida racetrack were filmed at the Auto Club Speedway in Fontana, California. In the film, Shelby is seen walking to the side of the track and holding a sign that reads 7,000 plus, go like hell, referring to Miles eclipsing 7,000 revolutions on the tachometer to push Ferrari driver Dan Gurney, played by his real-life son, Alex Gurney, to the limits. This did not occur in reality, and the phrase go like hell is likely a reference to the A.J. Bain book Go Like Hell, Ford, Ferrari, and their battle for speed and glory at Le Mans, which served as the inspiration for early drafts of the script before Mangold boarded the project. Now on to the immersive Le Mans 66 itself, where the film takes a bit more dramatic license to increase the sway of the story. First, very little footage was filmed at the real Le Mans racetrack in France. Instead, 5 different locations were used to replicate Le Mans, including pits, garages, and grandstands filmed in Agua Dulce Air Park in California, and tracks on Highway 46 in Statesboro, Georgia, among others. In the film, the first major hiccup Miles faces occurs when sprinting over to his GT40 to begin the race and slamming his head on the door, resulting in a malfunction that prohibits the door from closing properly. Miles drives the first lap while holding the door shut with one hand and steering with the other. Miraculously, all of this is authentic, genuinely prompting Miles' pit crew to bend the door backward until it properly closed. After truly mounting a furious comeback by breaking several record lap times, Miles takes the lead when Gurney's car breaks down and the leading Ferrari car crashes. This too is largely accurate, although the timeline of events has been compressed in the interest of time. By hour 8 of the 24-hour race, Miles is shown battling intensely with Ferrari driver Lorenzo Bandini, who is driving the new 330 P3 prototypes, built to compete with the GT40. Upon challenging Bandini for the lead, Miles suffers severe brake issues and has the calipers quickly replaced during a pit stop, at which point Bandini widens his lead. When Miles' team fixes his brakes extremely fast and gets his car back on track, Enzo Ferrari begins furiously protesting. This did not occur in reality whatsoever, as Ferrari was not present at Le Mans in 1966. According to Mangold, via IndieWire, the biggest cheat in this movie, Ferrari never showed up at Le Mans. I insistently put him there. I couldn't stand the idea of cutting to the kid and mom and Ferrari on the phone or on radios. I couldn't do it. Sorry, history. Second of all, Bandini never led the race at any point during the 24-hour marathon. Moreover, while Bandini's car eventually petered out, it lasted 17 hours in the race, which outpaced the other 330 P3s in competition and endured much longer than shown in the film. Therefore, the lengthy battle between Miles and Bandini during Le Mans was almost entirely fabricated for the audience. Accurately included, however, was Ford's team engineer, Phil Remington, played by Ray McKinnon, creating the cutting-edge brake-swapping system shown in the film, which, despite genuine protests from rival teams, was never legally outlawed during the race and gave Miles a major advantage down the stretch. Okay, now on to arguably the most infamous finish in Le Mans history. In the film, as Miles remains 2 minutes ahead of the others and on pace to set a record first-place finishing time, Leo Bebe orders to have all 3 Ford lead racers, Ken Miles, Bruce McLaren, and Chris Amon, who is changed to Ronnie Bucknam and played by Tanner Faust, finish in a 3-way dead heat, symbolizing the solidarity of the Ford Motor Company's racing team as all 3 GT40s cross the finish line simultaneously. This means Miles was forced to slow down, forgo personal triumph as a winner and new record holder, and act as a team player so Ford could take all the glory in a staged photo op meant to drum up good publicity. The Deuce agrees with Bebe and orders Shelby to inform the racers, which he angrily objects to at first, but eventually gives in when Bebe threatens to fire him if he declines. While almost all of this occurred in reality, how Miles truly felt in his heart and mind about the decision can never be known. The film is said to downplay Miles' anger over the mandate, while other reports claim Miles was never at peace with the contrived 3-way tie. In the film, Miles begrudgingly sets one more final record lap time before decelerating long enough to allow McLaren and Bucknam to catch up so they can finish as one. In the end, due to the fact that McLaren started 8 meters back from Miles on the starting line, Le Mans officials declared McLaren as the first place winner, and Miles the second place finisher, completely obliterating Bebe's dead heat result and shattering Ford's photo op. Despite obeying his employers and sacrificing his personal victory, Ken Miles was still blatantly robbed of his deserving first place win. Some claim McLaren accelerated at the last moment to finish ahead of Miles, but even if they crossed the line at the same time as planned, the technicality would have given McLaren the victory regardless. Shelby really did angrily confront Bebe as seen on screen, while Miles truly brushed off the result, expressed his gratitude to Ford, and began looking forward to Le Mans 1967. Finally, it's sad to report that Ken Miles' tragic death at the end of the film while test driving the Ford J car at Riverside International Raceway 2 months after Le Mans 66 happened exactly as it's portrayed in the film. After a 10-hour testing day, diagnostics failed to notice brake failure, leading to a freak accident that disintegrated the car, ejected Miles, and instantly killed him on August 17, 1966. He was 47 years old. However, the final scene of Shelby visiting Peter and giving him the wrench Miles threw at him in 1963 did not occur and was made up as a poignant reminder of how much Miles meant to Shelby, as well as Peter's eventual role as a professional auto race mechanic. Perhaps the saddest part of Miles' death, aside from leaving his wife and son behind, is that he never got to see how Ford went on to win Le Mans for 4 consecutive years, from 1966 to 1969, cementing the lasting legacy of his contributions to the GT40 and its successors. For a man named Miles, Ken sure did go the distance. And that, more or less, is what the fuck really happened to Ford versus Ferrari. For the most part, Mangold stuck to the overarching facts of what truly transpired, but compressed certain time elements, altered some minor facts, and combined a few characteristics to dramatize the conflict between Shelby, Miles, and the top Ford brass, and to make some of the racing dynamics a bit more enthralling for the audience. All standard prices to pay to alchemize memorable movie magic in the way Mangold has in his heartfelt ode to Le Mans 66. Let's hope he does the same for Indiana Jones 5 when it drops in June.